Yo, what is up, guys? It's Pedro here. And in today's video, I want to talk about some really good news that the Washington Commanders got about Sam Cosmi, his recovery, and just a bunch of other stuff as well that I want to talk about. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and that notification bell as well so you never miss a video. So, this was out the last week or so. John Keim kind of talked about it on his podcast, but it kind of went under wraps just because or under the radar because of other stuff going on, Noah Brown injury stuff, and mini camp's a big thing. So I did want to talk about this real quick. So it was reported by John Keim that the injury news for Sam Cosmi and the recovery process is going really, really well. And just to give you guys a refresher, Sam Cosmi did tear his ACL. I believe it was just ACL, might have been some other stuff. You never really fully know the whole story. With those injuries, sometimes it comes out later that was a torn ACL, MCL, whatever, like a bunch of different things. But that was in late January, which is really late in the season. And yeah, it's unfortunate. Obviously, that injury happens in general, but to have it at the end of the season when you're preparing for the next season, a few weeks after that, when or a week after that when they lost against the Eagles, it sucks. But the good news is that Sam Cosmi is recovering well. So I'll read this right here. I'm sure this is after the John Keim report, and I'll just go over some stuff here. But he talked about, Sam Cosmi, he had that injury, he had that surgery. I'm trying to close this right here. So there's definite optimism about the pace of the recovery. What that means for the season is still a little bit early to say. There are still more markers along the way, but it's looking good for Sam Cosmi right now. Everything so far has been looking good. When you watch him do some agility work, he looks good. When you tear an ACL, a lot of the time it's the movement from side to side. But I think being a lineman helps him in this situation. You don't have to do maybe as much as a skill position guy does. On the other hand, you've got to rely on those knees and legs to get yourself some power. But so far, so good for Sam Cosmi. And the other thing I'll add is, obviously he's a lineman. He's a heavier guy, which puts more weight on those knees, which could make the recovery a little bit harder at times. But then also he doesn't need as much twitch and stuff in some of those movements. And sorry if you guys hear some background noise. Trying to get this video out for you guys, but like I said, this is really good news for Sam Cosmi and the recovery process. I did listen to this whole segment on the podcast. Make sure you guys check out John Keim and all of his work, ESPN, but then also just his YouTube on Empire Media. But he did report that, like, if they did have, let's say, he used an example, I think 10 to 14 months, obviously, or 10 to 12. He was just using that as an example. ACLs are normally much shorter than that. But he was like, if it's a 10 to 12 month range, then I would expect him to come back on that 10-month side rather than that 12-month side. And again, that's not the timetable for the injury. He was just using an example. It could have been, he could have used a 1 month and a 2 month example, and he would have said, all right, he's probably coming back more on that 1 month side. ACL injuries, it differs, it varies player to player, position to position. Usually it's like 8 months ish is the range. Again, some guys it takes longer. Chase Young, I mean, it took him over a year to come back from that ACL injury. And then some guys come back super, super quick. So like I said, it varies player by player, position by position, depends on how bad the injury was. And with him, it didn't seem like it was super bad for an ACL. ACL injuries are really bad. But in terms of it just, comparing it to other ACL injuries, it didn't seem like it was too bad, which is really good. Sam Cosmi is one of our better players. He's going to make our offensive line even better when he comes back. If that's the start of the season, I don't know. I would be surprised, but this news makes it much more likely that he does come back on time. Like I said, don't know for sure. It's been what? I mean, he injured himself late January. So, it's been what? January to February to March to April to May to June. So it's been 5 months since that injury. And, it'll be another month and a half until training camp. So, or about a month. So that makes, the start of training camp marks 6 months since that injury. And then, the start of the season would be what, a couple months after that would be what, like a month and a half. So it'd be like 7.5 months after the injury. So it's possible that he comes back. It also could be, midway through the season he comes back, or, after the bye week, which would be a little bit later. It just, or it could be, I think the perfect scenario would be before the bye week, do a game before the bye week. Then he has more time to recover after that game than he normally would, and it's a good way for him to get some reps in and more recovery time. But that's it on the Sam Cosmi front. I did want to talk about a report from Lake Lewis, who's been on the beat for a minute now, and he said he believes Terry McLaurin will receive a contract extension worth anywhere from 36 to 37 million, annually, which is a lot, but that's kind of what we're expecting. I would say a little bit lower than that is kind of the general consensus on what he would get, is like 32 to 34 million a year. 37 would be a lot, and like Brandon here says, it would make McLaurin the second highest paid receiver in the NFL, which I do think that's a little bit rich. He's not the second best receiver in the NFL, but he's a dang good receiver, a better person, a really good leader, a good teammate, everything about that. And there's no way, we can survive without him. It wouldn't make sense. You got to keep him, and also you got to consider, whenever these deals get done, usually these guys are going to rise to the top of these lists when they get paid, because they're the most recent guy to get paid, and there's some guys that haven't necessarily gotten paid that are going to get paid more than Terry McLaurin. So in 3-4 years, he's not going to be the second highest paid, or let's say 3 years from now, he's not going to be the second highest paid. It might be more like the eighth, ninth best, or most money. And then I don't think it'll be number two anyways. I think he'll probably get more like 34-ish, $33 million a year, which is still a lot of money. And, he's already set up for life, but even more set up for life than he already is. And yeah, we'll, again, like I said, we'll wait and see with this. It's a little bit concerned now, but not really, until we get into training camp. Once we get into training camp and a deal hasn't been done, that's when you start to get a little bit more concerned. But right now, I'm not too concerned about the no Terry deal and him not reporting to minicamp. He didn't do that 3 years ago when he was looking for a new deal. So it's not crazy that he didn't do it now. But that is it for today's video. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys new, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a video. And peace.